coast to coast, border to
sorry.
border on iHeartRadio today. We have got a great guest with us today. Richard, go ahead and introduce yourself, my friend. Tell us what about yourself.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm Richard Vague. I have just released a new book called Paradox of Debt. My background is in banking and business, and most recently as the Secretary of Banking and Securities for the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. It's great to be here.
That's awesome. So this book, incredibly well written. Talk to me a little bit about your writing process.
Well, writing is something that, it doesn't come flowing from me. Even though this is my fifth book and in many respects the culmination of my work, it's nevertheless a grind. And we had an enormous amount of mathematical work to do. And then it was a matter of trying to write it all down. And you just kind of have to force yourself. I have a discipline of sitting down and writing for at least an hour or two a day, which and I have to do that whether I feel like it or not. So by hook and by crook, we got there. And once you get the first draft done, you pretty much only started. You have to smooth it out. You have to hopefully make it easier to read, and that takes a lot of iterations.
We have got a great guest with us today. He joins us live here on our big broadcast, talking a little bit about his latest book. So tell me a little bit about the title.
Well, you have debt as an overwhelming factor in economies, but often one that is taken for granted or ignored. And those who do focus on it tend to either say that it's a scourge and it's terrible, or that it's great and helpful. And our fundamental observation is that it is both. And that's why we call the book A Paradox of Debt. It is absolutely necessary for economic growth. Economies could not grow without it. At the same time, it can bring calamity, as it did in 2008. It can bring a slowdown or burdening of individuals in an economy, and I think to a certain extent is true in a lot of countries today. So it is both, and often at the same time, and our book tries to present both stories.
We have got a great guest with us today. He joins us live here on our big broadcast, coast to coast, border to border on iHeartRadio today, also AM/FM247.com. Tune in iTunes, and you can find us each and every day over there at JiggyJaguar.com. So this book, incredibly well written. Take me through the process of getting it edited and submitted to the publisher and all this.
Well, first, it's not the kind of book that it's not like a Harry Potter book. There aren't going to be a million folks that want to read it. This is for people who are serious about economics, really want to deeply understand the national and global economy. So step number one was getting a publisher to agree to publish it, because we'll have really good sales. We've already made the Wall Street Journal bestseller list and some others, but it's really these kind of books have a smaller audience to begin with. So I'm very fortunate to get a publisher to agree to do it. And once you've done that, then you can get serious about writing. And we've really been studying, our view is that even though there's 200 countries in the world, there's only 7 that together added up constitute 2/3 of the world's GDP. It's a very skewed situation. I mean, frankly, the U.S. and China alone are almost 1/3 of the world's GDP. So if you really study those 7, you know the world. And so that's what we did in this book, is we focused on the 7 largest economies of the world and really told the story there.
We have got a great guest with us today. Joins us live here on our big broadcast, coast to coast, border to border on iHeartRadio today, AM/FM247.com. So this book, you put a lot of time and effort into the book. What do you want readers to take away from your writing?
I'm sorry, I'm losing you. Would you mind
Not a
repeating
problem.
that?
Not a problem. We'll do it again, Richard. We'll do it again. It's technology. What do you want readers to take away from your writing?
Well, one of the big takeaways from the book is that debt, including government debt, actually creates wealth. And this was a surprise, I think, to many folks, and something we go into great detail about. But when the government spends money, it doesn't disappear. Most of that money ends up in the checking accounts of households. So in the 3 years of the pandemic, where government debt increased by a whopping $8 trillion, household wealth actually increased by $30 trillion. It's the money the government spent went into household checking accounts, and that flood of money actually pushed up values of real estate and stocks. So between the three of those things, you had a $30 trillion increase in household wealth. So that's a big part of the story. We obviously go into the dark side of debt too.
We have got a great guest with us today. Joins us live here on our big program. So, why is it people do not understand money?
Well, first of all, people have lives full of other things, and if you're gonna study something, often you study your own business or your own family or your own kids' lives. People don't have a lot of spare time to go dig deep into debt. Hopefully, that's a service our book can provide. It really packages into one place a very comprehensive story about debt. And the second thing I'd say is I think the economics profession has gotten a little esoteric. So, normally when you hear an economy expert talking, it's a little like Greek, that they're talking using esoteric terminology, esoteric mathematics. We try to take a much more straightforward approach, and when you do, I think the story becomes easier and clearer.
We have got a great guest with us today. He joins us live here on our big program. So how is the book doing as far as sales and reviews and things like that?
Well, we have great sales so far. We just launched in July, and we've made, Amazon and Barnes Noble and Wall Street Journal bestseller lists. So the early response has been favorable, and the reviews have been generally favorable as well. We've had some spectacular reviews. We've had some reviews that, suggested maybe the subject was a little dry. We fully understand that you have to really be interested in macroeconomics to want to dig into this book. But I think increasingly, with the state of the world being what it is and economics being as central, important, and distressing as they now are, I think we're seeing more and more folks who really want to push past the superficial commentary and understand macroeconomics at a deeper level so they can make better informed choices, both for policy at the national level and their own personal financial lives.
We have got a great guest with us today. Richard joins us live here on our big program. So this book, incredibly well written. You've put a lot of time and effort into the book. Talk to me a little bit about the research process for this book.
Well, you have to, one of the things that we spent a lot of time working on 5 and 10 years ago was the debt side of the equation. And, the debt buildup in '08 was the reason for the crisis. So we became quite expert in that area, but we began to understand that we needed to tell the whole story. So we needed to understand the assets on the balance sheet of the country and the sub-parts of the economy. Every economy, we look at the business sector, the household sector, as well as the government. And that took a lot of digging. As you can imagine, there's some countries like China that aren't exactly forthcoming with their information. There's some places like the OECD and the World Bank and the Bank of International Settlement which have invaluable sources of data, but it was really pulling all of that together and then looking at countries the way you would look at a business: assets and liabilities, income and expense. And when you do that, when you lay it out that way, for anybody that has any familiarity with that kind of analysis, things start to become a lot more clear. And we think that's really the heart and soul of our approach.
We have got a great guest with us today. He joins us live here on our big broadcast. Richard joins us here on the telephone. How do we get this book, my friend?
Well, thank you for asking. You can, of course, go to Barnes & Noble. You can go to Amazon.com. We have our own website, which is paradoxofdebt.com, and any of those places you'll be taken care of.
Well, we have got a great guest with us today. He joins us live, coast to coast, border to border on iHeartRadio today. Of course, AMFM247.com is the official website. Go over there and check it out today. Also, iHeartRadio, and you can listen to us each and every day over there, 2 Central, 3 Eastern, 12 Pacific, and 1 p.m. Mountain Standard for those of you who listen to us in the Colorado area. On KFRK in Denver, and of course, Richard, what is next for you as an author, my friend?
Well, actually, I'm hard at work. All of our work in this book and others has really taken us in to what is the meaning of money and debt itself. How did it originate? Where does it stand? And that really took us into the founding of America itself, because as we all know, there was a lot of different types of money when you had 13 colonies. We had the first bank appear in the United States in 1781 to help finance the Revolutionary War, by the way. And then we had our first central bank start in 1791. Thomas Willing was the president. It helped us finance the assumption of our government and state debt and Alexander Hamilton's famous legislation. So the neglected character in all of that is a gentleman named Thomas Willing, who was one of the richest men in America, our first bank president, and an individual that presided over the economy for almost 30 years. But since he wasn't a military general or a politician, he's kind of been lost to history. So we're writing a biography of Thomas Willing, the first banker in the United States, a neighbor
awesome.
and peer of Hamilton, Washington, and others.
That's awesome. Well, your book is absolutely amazing. Richard joins us today here in our broadcast. He's discussing his incredible book, The Paradox of Debt, A New Path to Prosperity Without Crisis. So I have to ask, is Richard Vague a pen name, or is that your God-given Christian name? Because I'll tell you, that is an amazing name. I don't give a crap what it is. It's an amazing name.
Well, there aren't too many of us, and we actually got that name. The family name was from Canada, and it was
Canada.
Veilleux,
There it is.
Velleus. And when my ancestors crossed the United States, how the immigration officials changed it to Vague. So the family name's been Vague ever since. And it's a French word.
I love it. I love the fact that, we used to talk about, especially on this show, we used to talk about a lot of times we would have your name is your destiny. I'm confused though by the your name is your destiny doesn't work with you, because you have written an incredible book here about money and debt, and your name is Richard Vague. Now, if you were writing a book that didn't really explain a lot of things, Richard Vague would be perfect.
I fully understand.
Yes,
that's not a paradox of debt. That's a paradox of nomenclature.
Yes, I love it though. So, talk to me a little bit about the cover of the book.
Well, when you make your cover, it's the publisher's trying to get sales. So we use bright red because red is the color of debt, as we know.
Yes.
And we show some currency on there because a whole lot of the book is about money, the definition of money. One of the concepts we explore is there really is essentially no form of money that is not based on debt. So it really gets into the two most important things about the book right there on the cover.
That's awesome. That's awesome. We have got a great guest with us today. He joins us live. Richard Vague is with us. He is discussing his brand new book, The Paradox of Debt. So one of the things that I find absolutely amazing about people who get into debt is, and especially, governments, corporations, all these things, a lot of times these people get into debt and they shouldn't. Like, for instance, the Defense Department, the Pentagon. These guys have not been able to pass an audit in like 10 years. But yet they get so much freaking money. How in the world does this happen?
Well, I will tell you something. I spent my career in business.
Yes.
And one of the things we had to live with was bank examiners and auditors. And I came to the view very early on in my career that was one of the most critical areas of control within any entity. I remember when I first took over as bank president when I was 30 years old, a bank in the Northeast, and I walked into the door only to find out that the bank was $1 billion. The bank that was only about $300 million in outstanding was about $1 billion out of balance. Now that's an equal amount of unmatched debits and credits, but it's it'll gnaw at your stomach. And so something I've done in my career is really work extra hard to make sure things are reconciled and balanced, and the nickels and dimes and pennies are accounted for. But it is not unusual at all to find large-scale operations that have significant accounting and audit problems, and it permeates a lot of organizations. And frankly,
yes,
it's something that every organization should make its priority: control, having all your I's dotted and your T's crossed and everything in balance.
Well, it's absolutely amazing the way some of these things happen, and the way people treat debt, and the way people get into debt.
By the way,
yes, go ahead.
I wouldn't want the job of being the guy that has to get the Pentagon's books back in balance.
Oh, yeah.
That sounds to me like a lifetime occupation.
Well, I just always find it so strange that they get money, they get more money every single year from all the various people, and for whatever reason, they can't pass an audit. And I'm like, where in the world is all this damn money going? I'm like, I hope that at least, if all this money we're sending over to the Ukraine, I know exactly where that money's going. They're giving it to defense contractors so they can buy weapons. That's pretty simple. We're never going to have to worry about them having to pass an audit. But I just always find it so strange. But even the average person gets into debt, and it's like, how in the world does this happen? Because why is it we don't teach things like this in school, or they don't anymore?
Well, when it comes to war, you can easily say that one side may win, one side may lose. It might be a draw, but the defense contractors are the real winners.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. We have got a great guest with us today. Richard Drake joins us here on our big broadcast. He's got this incredible book, The Paradox of Debt. Speaking of people being able to balance, balance their debt or get out of debt or whatever. What do you think of these shows like the Dave Ramseys and all these guys who they claim to help you be able to get out of debt and all these things, and claim to be able to help you manage your money and all these things? What, as someone who's written a book about this, what do you think of some of these folks?
Well, to put it in perspective, if you look at private sector debt, and that's business and household debt within the economy.
Oh, yeah. After
World War II, it was only about 35% of GDP. Today, it's 160% of GDP.
Yes.
These are the small business loans, student loans, home mortgage loans, and this and that and the other. So we're we're almost 5 times more indebted on the private sector today as we were after World War II. And by the way, private sector debt is a lot larger, and this surprises most folks. There's a lot more private sector debt than there is public debt.
Yes.
So, I think some of these guys are good. Some of these guys are charlatans. Some of them are in the middle.
Yeah.
But the issue of personal discipline around the subject of debt is a real issue. And most folks let it get away from them, at least a little bit. So I think, anything that draws our attention to that and causes folks to be more disciplined, pay a little more attention to that, is probably not a bad thing.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So one of the things that a few years ago I thought was very interesting when I started hearing about this, and it kind of backs up with kind of what we were talking about a little bit earlier in regards with your book. I started to notice that down in Tampa, I guess is where the performance center is. WWE, of course, has a performance center down there where if you're a wrestling hopeful, you can go down there and they'll teach you the ins and outs of a headlock. But one of the things that they started teaching these guys is how to manage their money, how to save their money, how to pay their taxes, because they're all independent contractors. How to do all this. And I've always found this interesting that just now, within the last 5 years, they've decided, maybe we ought to do that. Why don't more people know about how to manage their money, whether it's professional athletes or the average Joe?
I heard a few years ago, and I don't know if this information is current or not, but I can remember not too many years ago and hearing a statistic that the average NFL player was out of money 5 years after the end of their career.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. There's I don't know if you've been following the speaking of the NFL, I don't know if you've been following that story that's happened over the last, probably 2 weeks, of the guy who was the subject of the movie The Blind Side. The Sandra Bullock movie. He is wanting all sorts of money, and a lot of people have speculated that he's wanting all this cash because he's blown through all of his NFL money. And
remember Mike Tyson blew through
$200
million.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just amazing to me how all these people...
When I was Secretary of Banking, one of our departments was responsible for providing training on what we call financial literacy.
Yes.
To senior citizens, to folks in the military.
Yes.
Even to folks who are incarcerated and that were about to leave prison and reenter the workforce. And let me tell you, we trained thousands upon thousands of people, and that was a drop in the bucket compared to the need.
Yes.
It's not taught in school by and large. It's not taught in universities by and large. It's not taught in continuing education by and large. Most, it's like the most important things we never get any training for. Handling our finances, being a parent, being in a marital relationship. We never get training for any of those things, and they're the most important things in our lives.
Well, Richard, you have been amazing. This has been just fantastic. Before we let you go, how do we communicate with you online, whether it's the website, social media, buy your book, all this stuff?
Well, you can always get hold of me at my email address, which is rvague@gmail.com. I have a website, which is richardvague.com. And then I already mentioned the book's website, paradoxofdebt.com. So any and all of the above.
Well, you are amazing, my friend. I definitely want to do this again because you're fantastic. I also, due to the fact that you've got like a business book here, I have 2 radio shows that I deal with on a regular basis who I think would love the hell out of your book. So somehow get my email address or whatever from your press person, and I will turn you on to these people so you can get on their shows, or I'll send them over to your press person, or however we need to do this, because your book needs to be talked about widely, and you need to be on every show that you can possibly be on, my friend.
Well, the great privilege that I have is being on your show. You have a spectacular show, and it's frankly just a privilege to be with you.
Well, you're amazing. Thanks for doing this, Richard. Have yourself a pleasant weekend. I'll talk to you soon. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Appreciate it. There he goes. That's Richard Vague. I love that name. The Paradox of Debt. It is a fantastic book, and he joins us today here on our big broadcast. And, of course, you can join us each and every day over there at jiggyjaguar.com. We will see you next time you are listening to the world famous Big Broadcast.